Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. Hello and welcome to season 3. If you're new here, welcome. If you're an old friend returning, welcome back. It's good to be back. We are home. We are here. Oh my God, isn't that intro just insane? It makes this podcast feel professional and official and all the things. Thank you so much to my friend Sal, who created this for me. I have him linked in the show notes. Salva Ceres is his Instagram. If you want to check him out, he's a medicine musician, ceremonialist. He does sound journeys, Reiki, Kundalini yoga. He does it all. So go check him out. Thank you, Sal. Thank you. Okay, well, let's give you a summary on this episode here. So it's been 9 months since I took a step back from the show to get my life in order. And during this time, I finished my master's program, moved back to my hometown of West Palm Beach. I officially became licensed as an acupuncture physician, and I found myself in a massive dark night of the soul. So within this time, I often found myself experiencing deep shame, which had me blocked creatively, mentally, spiritually. It's been part of the reason why I haven't returned to this podcast. And so in this episode, I talk about how I found myself slipping into the arms of shame and how I've worked my way through it. I mean, obviously, this podcast is out and ready to go. I'm doing a full deep dive into the thing that kept me blocked. So I'm here on the other side, and it feels great. So in true School of Whispers style, this episode tells a story of the lessons which can come from sitting within the whispers of one's darkness. Highlights from this episode: a little catch up on the roller coaster of events which have transpired since season 2, how lessons on validation, fully embracing my cringe, and more helped me transform my life within this darker period, and some details into my first time sitting with the plant technology Iboga. There's a lot in this episode. I'm gonna take a step back and let you listen on in. All right. Hello, my beautiful friends. I feel nervous. So I stopped the podcast in October. For season 2, I stopped season 2, and I have sat behind this mic so many times to record interviews, which I have kept, but to record solo episodes, which I don't think are going to see the light of day. And I know this is the one that I'm going to be sharing with you all, and I'm freaking out. Oh my God, there's so much to update you on. I was actually just telling a friend that my life lately has kind of felt like a merry-go-round of shitstorms. And it's the kind of storms where, thank source, where there's an eye in the storm and I'm chilling. But because I've lacked the hindsight, I thought that the storm was over. But no, it was a moment to gather and to rest. And then we were back right into it. So to give you a brief summary of everything that's happened, I'm not going to really go into details because quite honestly, there's a lot of drama. there's a lot of drama, and I'm learning a lot about I'm reading this really great book called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender by David R. Hawkins. And there's this whole part where he kind of talks about, I'm going to call it the anatomy and physiology of emotions. And what I've learned about love is not interested in the details. And I'm way more interested in in vibrating at a frequency of love. I hesitated because I was like, don't sound like a spiritual bullshitter here, but that is actually something that I've really been diving deep into. But anyways, I regress. So with the spirit of love, without diving into the details of drama, I know that a lot of us, I know I love a good spilt tea, but you're not going to get it from me here, folks. But yeah, October, I had an experience in October that really dove me into the world of shame. And I have oscillated within the vibration of shame for a long time. And that's really what I'm going to focus on today, is the lessons that I've learned from shame. But after that, I finished my degree. I got my undergrad degree in health sciences, my master's in oriental medicine, and then I moved back to my hometown, West Palm Beach. Within moving here, my life blew up. I got a job, quit a job, may have just recently got another job. I don't know. I'll keep you updated on that one. I lost friendships. I made new friends. My marriage kind of blew up. We're good now, and that's why I'm sharing with you. But, there was a point where I almost walked away. I passed my boards. I got licensed as an acupuncture physician. And I have walked through so many unprecedented portals of shame, grief, pride, depressy. I like to call it, instead of depression, I like to say feeling a little depressy. Anxiety. Oh, the anxiety. Oh, and something else I forgot to mention. I sat with a new plant medicine called Iboga. And that is something that completely changed the trajectory of my life. There's so much to share. Part of me doesn't even know where to begin. So I'll start at the beginning. The portal of shame here, it actually began with a friend. We're still buddies. We're still friends now. But how it got triggered is we went to this spiritual festival that was not what we thought it was going to be. And it somehow changed this friend's view of me. And I'm not going to, again, spend any time on details or what I think they were going through, because love is not in the details. And I have no fucking clue. A beautiful lesson I've learned is, even if somebody shares their situation with you, that is maybe 20% of the whole situation. So who the fuck am I to assume I know anything about what's going on? Because they're going to share with me a filter of what they're experiencing, and that's all I know. And I don't want to have the arrogance of assuming I know anything anymore. And that's actually it's been a huge lesson in pride and humility to get to this place. But anyways, yeah, so, for a while with this friend, I had no idea what was going on. It was about 2 weeks of feeling really like, what the fuck? I knew there was something wrong, but nothing was really said, and I didn't know. I just, the whole time, the question was, what did I do? Going through every conversation obsessively and being really convinced that there was something wrong with me. There was something I did wrong. And thus began the cycle of shame. And long story short, when we did talk about it, there was a lot of confusion on their side, but something they mentioned was they were based, because of this festival, the way that they express their spirituality, they were questioning their own, and I was also a part of that question. It has come to my attention that a lot of people see me as this really, really spiritual person, which totally makes sense because my whole podcast is, School of Whispers. And yeah, it's silly because I don't take stock of myself a lot. I mean, I do, but I guess it's more, I've been trying to work on more not seeing myself through other people's eyes, that it almost put a little bit of a blinder of realizing how strongly I am associated with them in spirituality. I think that made sense. And I didn't do the best job explaining that, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is this person needed space from me, and all I could think of was, oh my God, my spirituality is getting me in trouble. I'm losing friends because of it. And just all this whole spiral of shame and looking back at my podcast, my baby, and feeling so cringe. I love to listen back at episodes, some pivotal ones, because there's just so many lessons for me. I know that some people, they can't stand the sound of their own voice, but I've really come to love the sound of my voice and just the journey of being able to sit down and start this podcast, or even just come out of my spiritual closet on Instagram and social media, was such a journey into shame and expression and owning myself and loving myself. And all of a sudden I found myself tumbling right back to that place. And the thought of listening to my voice on a podcast, I tried. It was too much. And let alone the idea of sitting behind the mic and sharing. And so an interesting thing that happened too is I blocked myself spiritually. Granted, I was just trying to survive within the end of my master's program. I stopped meditating. I stopped journeying in terms of, listening to shamanic drums or playing my own drums and just opening myself up. There's also an aspect to that. I think there was a little bit of fear considering what happened at the end of season 2. And if you want to know what happened, I really don't want to get too much into that. I've barely thought about it since then, but it is a good story. So if you want, go ahead and listen to last episode of season 2. And I all of a sudden was no longer getting visions. And I am one of the most visual people I know. And so, I was doing hape ceremonies as I did before, but it was really mostly to ground myself rather than to move deeper within. And I really worked hard on not losing my shit over that and not being like, oh my God, I lost my vision, I lost my psychicness or whatever, because I know that I trust that everything that we have is within us and is accessible from within. And so because it's accessible from within, it's impossible to quote unquote lose it. What is possible is to build layers of fear and shame, guilt, pride on top of that. And that creates that block. Another thing I've come to realize is that while I was living within shame, I was also living really strongly within pride. I lacked humility because I was looking at my persona, my personality, and I felt so like I'd put myself out there and put myself under the microscope of scrutiny. Oh my God, I get so vulnerable on this podcast. And I revealed myself too deeply to these people. And so now they're going to judge me and put me down and think they know me and all these things. Some things that have never happened through this podcast, by the way. I have the best listening community I could ever ask for. I have never been received by anyone with anything other than love and respect and acceptance and all that good stuff. And so I was majorly projecting. But why I say I was stuck within pride and lacking humility is because I've recently learned within this Pathway of Surrender book is what I just didn't see myself as a prideful person. But when you are so sensitive at the state of judgment of others, of your personality, something that is never static, you're holding on to an egotistical persona. And here, let me see if I can read a passage from the book that's going to articulate what I'm trying to articulate here. Yes, this is it. So again, as I was projecting in my mind, I was defending myself. I was tearing myself down and defending myself against my quote unquote listener, which was my own ears. And what reminds me of that is in the book, Dr. Hawkins, he says, when we let go of our need for validation or to prove ourselves right, then the challenges against us fall away. This brings us to one of the basic laws of consciousness. Defensiveness invites attack. Pride is thin ice, a porous substitute for that rock-like real strength that comes from courage, acceptance, and peace. And my goodness, the desire for validation, I mean, it's been strong throughout my whole life, but lately within the past 9 months or so, I have wanted to share the details of my story, of the drama, to friends who will listen, friends who I can trust, which thank God for all of you. Thank you. I love you all so much. And I got lost. I got lost in the details. I lost myself from a desire for validation. And it just followed me. It followed me in a new job I got. I was working for someone who operated from a level of really strong judgment. And again, without giving details, because they don't matter. And also, I don't want to relive the shame here. But there were just inappropriate comments made about my looks or how I lived my life. And there was this power dynamic there. So it was hard for me to see it for what it was. It was actually post Iboga that I was like, oh shit, these are red flags here. And there were just other red flags that, I realized, oh, shame has made its way into my life here. And now it's time to make a change. Actually, a funny anecdote I will share is a couple months ago, I have these family friends. I love them so much. They're very religious. And at some point, they sat me down and very seriously, with a look of fear and something else in their eyes, they asked, Stephanie, are you a witch? And my husband, Mana, started laughing. And I gave him this look of like, Mana, they're not laughing. And my reaction was deep shame and fear. And I was like, me? A witch? No way, no. And, with hindsight and like, yeah, I am a witch. Like my teacher, Dr. Adamson, when I told him, he was like, Steph, look at the medicine you do and the take that you spin on this medicine. You work with herbs, you talk to your herbs, you talk to your pet snake, you have dreams about him, you talk to your cats, you're a witch. And, I think if I was in a different place in my life, I would have found the humor in it. But, the silly places that shame has found me. It followed me in my marriage. It followed me in friendships that are no longer existing within my life. And so from that point of my story, I'd like to share the things that have helped me step out of shame. I had to pause and take a couple of deep breaths because my whole body is feeling this conversation. I was going to say I've waited too long to start the podcast, but I don't believe that. I believe it's all divine timing, and divine timing is my specialty. But a part of the reason why I waited so long to do this is because I wanted to be in a good place to talk about these things. And I often would find myself in a place of bitterness and resentment. And Mana, my husband, and I, was it last night? Yeah, it was yesterday. We did a ceremony of grief to grieve the past, especially grieving the life I left behind in Orlando, to grieve what our lives could have been, and to also grieve the pain in the present moment, to say goodbye rather, not to grieve, but to let go of the grief and everything in the present moment. And today was a really good day. Today was a day for courage. And while I'm still within a lot of portals, or at least a small handful of the portals that have opened up this year. And by the way, when I say a handful, that is minimal compared to the portals that have opened up this year. When I tell you it has been a merry-go-round of shitstorms, I kid you not, I have never experienced anything like this in my life. I've had, those people who, I don't know if you know these people, but like when they have their spiritual awakening and their whole life just completely blows up, that's what it's felt like for me. I am not the same person who sat behind the mic almost, it's been like 9 months. I've gone through my gestation period. I have been birthed into a whole new fucking person. And I guess that makes sense, as they say that human cells regenerate every 7 years, and I'm on my 28th year. It's been excruciating and beautiful and like magic in so many ways. Unprecedented is the word that keeps on coming up. I've never had my life blow up like this before. And I know that I saw this quote on Pinterest. It said, "There will be times where you will collapse and crumble. This is not your destruction. This is your rebirth." It's been next level. And I know that I was telling Mana within our grieving ceremony that we will look back at this time with such a tender reverence, because it is forging who we are meant to become. So the things that have helped me work through shame. Well, of course, talking to friends, but like taking it easy on talking to friends. I'm somebody who I need a lot of like a good circle of people to talk to and just share things with. But like when I share, if you are a listener to this podcast, I share possibly to the level of oversharing, but it's just how I am. And it does help me just when I open myself up to others, the validation is a beautiful thing. It can be a beautiful thing. I went too far on the side. I swung too far on the pendulum for my reliance on validation. But when I have received validation from my loved ones, from sharing, especially those parts that are only just crawling their way from the depths of my darkness to awareness, to be able to share that to an ear who doesn't assume or judge or act out of spite, who is truly there to listen. There's something truly magical about it. That being said, I have also shared with people during this period, and I've immediately regretted it. It has felt like it was used against me. It's felt like, it's I have gotten burned from sharing with the wrong people that I thought I could share with. And it's really taught me, it's had me reconsider, why do I share? And yes, validation, but if I can get to a place of self-validation, it's the question, why do I need validation from these people so badly? And it's because I have seen myself as intrinsically wrong for so long in my life. And so while sharing is such a beautiful thing of bringing yourself to the light to be seen and heard, there has to be a point for myself, there has to have been, of asking myself, why the fuck am I sharing everything so much, repeating the same story again and again and again? And why am I getting so angry when it's like, I have every right to feel anger when somebody is fucking spitting in my face when I share my vulnerability. But there has been times where I've had people, rather than spit in my face, they just approach it from a more neutral position. Rather than saying, yeah, Steph, you are so right. You are so valid. Oh my God, like, fuck everyone. You are so, like, that you were wronged. Instead, it's more, my husband Mana is like wonderfully notorious for this, of just questioning. And the questioning was very triggering. And it helped me just get to that place of realizing, oh, I feel I am intrinsically invalid. How can I get to the other side of that? So gaining that awareness there has been very special, very pivotal. Another actionable thing that has really helped me has been journaling. And the way of journaling that I have gone about this is journaling in the cringiest way possible. Because my spirituality became something that I cringed hardcore at, would sit down and I would journal in the most flourishing spiritual language I possibly could. And then I would read it back over and over and over again. Sometimes I would say it out loud and I would feel that it was like exposure therapy. I would let myself read it again and again until I stopped feeling that little so much anymore. I would expose myself to the cringiest side of me until it didn't punch me in the gut so much anymore. So that's been super effective. If we're going to go chronologically, I would say the other thing that has helped me immensely is good old Iboga. Gosh, that feels like a rabbit hole that I don't know if I guess I'm sitting right here in front of the mic. I guess I'm going to go into it right now. Okay. So, fuck it. Okay. So my Iboga journey, it actually began a year ago after I got out of my dieta. And I was starting to have dreams about Iboga. And anytime I would think about it, I would feel super drunk. Like just my limbs would get really heavy and flush with blood. My head would get a little bit spinny. My vision would kind of get a little bit funky, and my hearing would get a little bit strange too. And so I eventually reached out to my friend Danica, who I knew served, and we did a session together. Part of the reason why I reached out to her is I was having these dreams, which in hindsight were very Iboga-like, where I would be like in this tornado of thoughts, and I'd be spinning and spinning, and then I would call out for help, and I saw Danica kind of like swimming within the tornado, and she'd reach out and we held hands, and I said, "Danica, please make it stop," and she giggled and said, "Nope." So that's what really made me decide, okay, I need to reach out to her. So within a session, she said, "Hey, I think you should reach out to my friend Troy." And I didn't. And then a couple of months later, a friend of mine was telling me that they were getting some integration counseling with this great guy. Oh, what's his name? Troy. And he was living, at the time when I first learned about him, he lived in Costa Rica. I think it just felt, it just felt too far away. But then all of a sudden I realized that he and his partner Joe moved to Sarasota. And for those of you who are listening and fall in love with Joe and Troy just by me talking about them, because it's really hard not to, unfortunately, they are not going to be in Sarasota forever. So just put a pin on that. But I absolutely recommend that you follow them, as I will, wherever they go, because these people are just so beautiful. I'll have them both on the podcast this season. I'm going to be interviewing Troy pretty soon here. But yeah, so my experience, I think in March or April, I started to make the moves towards, setting up an Iboga ceremony with Troy and Joe, with my husband. And there were times where we were going to back out, and I mean, these two just lived their whole lives in service, and they made it so possible and accessible for us. And for that, I am endlessly grateful, because as I mentioned, it has been something that has changed the entire trajectory of my life. I will work with this plant for the rest of my life, and I want to dedicate a huge piece of my life to it, because the gifts that I've received from working with it, it feels like a new chance at life. And the lessons I've learned and what it can do for the brain, it blows my fucking mind. And so I'm not going to really get too much into what ceremony was, but I will say, again, like my dream was very akin to Iboga, because what happened for me, a huge piece of it, is called a mind purge. And so like if you're somebody who consumes a lot of media, or like me, just a ruminator, I would have my professors at school, they would feel my pulse and go, "Oh, you're an overthinker." And I'd be like, "How do you know that?" But now I know what it means to feel a pulse and to know that somebody's an overthinker. But yeah, that was me. Hello. And especially at the time, I was grieving a friendship and really, really blaming myself. And blaming myself for the things that had gone wrong in my marriage. And I hated myself. I really walked into this experience feeling really strong self-loathing. It's like all the years of work. I mean, at the time it felt like they just went out the door. I woke up days where I couldn't get out of bed. And I received some feedback from the friendship that has since ended during that time, that like I was too depressed. They were disappointed that they weren't having any fun around me because I was too low. Side note, if anyone tells you something along those lines while you're within your dark night of the soul, then they're quite simply not someone who's meant to walk with you within this chapter. with hindsight, I would much rather be alone than to be around somebody like that within my dark, depressy state. Because there's nothing wrong with me. I was perfect as I was. It was meant to be as it was. And they're not a bad person either. They don't have to be around if they don't want to be around that. You know what I mean? Like there's no right or wrong here. It's more the reality is, who are you going to stay close with and who are you going to let go of? And yeah, just to paint a bit of a picture, I was a fucking mess. So a huge piece of that ceremony was me facing those thoughts. It was really interesting. I feel more at home with an Iboga than I do with ayahuasca, bufo, any of the other medicines mushrooms. Once I was in it, and before I keep going, I actually want to give reverence, and by mentioning that the keepers of the Iboga plant, which is from Central Africa, is this ancient tradition. I'm struggling with the word. I wouldn't say religion. I guess you could say cult. It's a way of living. It's a way of living. It's a philosophy, way of life called the Bwiti people. And the Bwiti they're everything. And they make the ceremony what it is. The Bwiti way is the way I want to live my life. That's for sure. And I would say that's one of the big differences between Iboga and ayahuasca for me. Is ayahuasca kind of entered the space, and I could feel this. I feel like a lot of us who have sat with ayahuasca, you feel this distinct presence, whereas Troy calls Iboga a technology, and I see what he means, because it really just connected me so much deeper with my mind. I was very lucid and conscious and present within myself there, while also simultaneously having some of the most interesting, intensive visual and auditory hallucinations of my life. But the real presence that I could feel within me the whole time were the Bwiti people, the spirits of it, the ancestors. But yeah, the moment that ceremony started and the vision started, I saw I saw the Bwiti enter the room, and then my mind purge happened. I was like, oh, I've been here before. I've been here many times before. And those dreams that I had, they came back to me, but also just living every day, just ruminating excessively in circles, trying to figure things out and solve issues with my mind, which is so fruitless. But I was like, oh, been here, done that. Yeah. And so, while there are a lot of unknowns within the ceremony, and I can't guarantee you that the way my mind works with Iboga is not going to be the same way that your mind works with Iboga. But another great thing to mention, it's a very cheeky medicine. And so it was very silly. And I'm a very silly person. And so it really magnified that silliness. And I looked back at that dream with Danica, who, reached out and we held hands. And I was like, make it stop. And she giggled and said, nope, I won't. Yeah, it was very just akin to the medicine. And so within the ceremony at some point, Joely, she came and sat with me and guided me. And a technique that Troy taught me within our pre-ceremony therapy session is the letting go technique, which is from the book that I mentioned. And I'll link it in the show notes because this has become my emotional Bible. And something that Troy says is throw away the descriptions of the emotions within the book. Chapter 2 is the most important chapter. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. However, I have really gained a lot too from just learning the anatomy and physiology of emotions within my body. It's been very fascinating. But all that being said, I don't necessarily agree with everything that's said in this book, but I can get around chapter 2, which is the letting go process. To really simplify it, it is the process of feeling the emotion. Well, I'll kind of put it the way that Troy had me do it the first time he had me do it. He asked me how I was doing, burst into tears. And he's like, all right, take a couple of deep breaths. And he said, name what you're feeling. And I named it. And he said, describe what you're feeling. And so I described it. And then he said, okay, throw out the name, throw out the description. They do not matter. Now feel what you're feeling, which is just pure energy. The name fell away. The description fell away. It was pure energy within my body. And he said, good, now observe it. And I did. And you know what happened? It changed. I observed and I let it move. And since my Iboga experience, I wrote this song, and the name of it is called Observe and Let It Move. And the chorus is, when my body feels, instead of name or describe it, I watch and wait, observe and let it move. And that chorus has been repeated in my mind again and again. I'm so grateful for the medicine songs that come to me, because they are the lessons I'm meant to learn again and again and again and again on repeat. And so within the Iboga ceremony, it was so valuable for me to observe my thoughts, to observe and let them move, to realize, and God, hanging out with Troy and Joe, it's especially when you're on Iboga, because your ability to learn is just magnified. It's like I'm in a library of all my favorite podcasts, and I'm just there listening to the stories, the lessons. Troy has dedicated his life to ending suffering, and I will tell you, that man does not suffer. He has had every reason in the world to suffer. Death, destruction, abuse, you name it. And he is the proof in his pudding of research. And every question you have, he has a reference to the answer. And so within the ceremony, something that just played over and over again, that was kind of a rendition of a few things that Troy had said before and within ceremony, was, you are not your body, and your mind is an organ. I am not my body, and my mind is an organ. What does that mean? Well, the anxiety and all the labels, the shame, the guilt, the grief, the fear, anger, resentment, all of it is within my body, and that is not who I am. What I feel is not who I am. I can hold on to these things and create an identity and a personality around it. And I could tell myself till the cows come home that this is who I am, but that's never going to be true. And my mind being an organ, at some point within ceremony, I asked Troy, I was like, does it ever end? Because he was like, how you doing? And I go, it's relentless. And he's laughing. He goes, yep. And I was within my mind purge, and I was laughing, and I said, yeah, but I'm here for it. And he said, I just want to remind you. Well, I asked him, does it ever end? And he goes, does what ever end? I said, the mind. Does thinking ever end? And he goes, Steph, your mind is an organ, just like your heart is an organ and your lungs are an organ. 1, do you want to tell your organs to stop? No. 2, do I have the access of my autonomic nervous system to make these organs stop working? No. If I did, I sure as hell wouldn't access them, because then Stephanie would cease to exist. And just realizing that okay, I can't get my mind to stop, and I don't want to get my mind to stop, was huge for me. And then what he said was, you know what the mind is? He goes, you know those short guys who you grew up with, who all of a sudden, they grow up, they get a degree, and they become finance bros, and they're making money, and all of a sudden they think they're tough. And then in true Iboga style, all of a sudden I get this image of a short guy in chubby shorts with no shirt and a tie around his neck, and he's running around the place like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was like, yeah, but they don't know what they're doing. He goes, well, maybe. But let's get back to the mind. The mind is like that. The mind gets a couple of ideas and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm tough. I know shit now. And it's not true. But we have the choice here. We always have the choice. Do you want to let the mind run the show and take the driving wheel? Or do you want to learn how to control your mind? Because while you can't make your heart stop and you don't want to, you can also learn ways like breath work and diet and lifestyle to be in control on how your heart is influenced by the world around you. And that's what this letting go process has become for me. It's helped me understand I am not my body. My mind is an organ, and I can be in charge of what I allow to be filtered through my mind, through my lifestyle, my diet choices, how I speak to myself. I look at myself every day in the mirror. I hold my face. Well, not every day, most days. I look in the mirror and I say, you are the love of my life. You are the love of my life, and it is you and me, and it will always be us, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure that you feel loved and protected and worthy by my hand. And while I'm here, I'll say that the reason why I'm not getting into all the visions and nuances of ceremony is because all of it was a purge. None of it mattered. I love Troy says, I don't give a shit what happens in ceremony. What matters is what happens after ceremony. And a practice like that has been monumental in helping me move on from the chapter of shame here. Another really interesting thing that Troy said to me within the ceremony is, oh God, well, there's a lot of interesting things that he said, but I was struggling. I was trying to get out of that self-shame and feeling like I made a lot of strides within the psycho-spiritual journey of it. But then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm doing all of this and I come out of the ceremony, the discovery day, because after ceremony you have a whole day to just relearn how to be. And the medicine's still very much within you. And I'm like, oh my God, what if I go through all of this and I'm still anxious and fucked up? And I realized I had a huge block of self-doubt here. So I raised my hand and I called him over and said, hey, Troy, I'm struggling with self-doubt. And he said, okay. Well, I don't think he said these words exactly, but he said something along the lines of, the key to life is balance. And when you see something that's ugly, it's off balance. When you see something that's beautiful, it's off balance. What I strive for is a neutrality. And so he said, okay, Steph, you might be right. Your life could fucking blow up. You and Mana will cease to exist together as a couple. And all the things that you think about yourself are so true. And it's all going to go to shit. And I start giggling. And I'm pretty sure he's like, yeah, that sounds pretty like extreme, right? Yeah. Okay, well, what's on the other side of the extreme? And I told him about this life I dream of. And he goes, okay, and that can happen too. But the thing is you don't know which one is going to happen, but you can choose what you're going to put your faith in. And then he says, okay, so what's on the other side of self-doubt? And I said, self-confidence. And he says, okay, well, if you're in self-doubt, you're off balance. If you're perfectly confident, you're off balance too. So what if you can slide your way into the middle between and just live between the two emotions? And the moment I saw myself, it was like 2 slices of bread that were just barely touching by a millimeter. And I was a slice of cheese that slid right between the 2 breads. And I existed within that neutrality, and this anxiety that I had been feeling for months vanished. It was done. It was gone. And so that's another line from my song that I wrote is, if I fly too high, I'll fall too far. I am the space between the earth and sky, the pivot point. I am neutrality. There was a time when I chose one side. I thought it was for me. And now I see it was a fight to choose polarity. And so I really have been working on, yes, these emotions and being aware of them and learning, what's on the other side of pride. And it's, humility and gratitude and courage and willingness. But also, none of these names matter. None of them fucking matter. What matters is give myself the space to feel. And I'll tell you, this process, it takes up a lot of my time. And it's great, especially I've been off. So I just got back on social media, but I've mostly been off of it. And, it's like those moments. I had a moment where Mana went to the bathroom. We're out to dinner, and I realized I'd ordered way too much food. And so I walked up to the server and I said, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I want to cancel this part of my order." And he was not happy. He was like, "Well, I already put it in." And I was like, "I'm so sorry, but can you please go cancel it?" And he goes, fine, I will. And I went and sat down, and I felt so bad and so ashamed and so guilty. And then I was like, fucking throw all of those words away. Let's feel. Don't create the story around it. Feel. And so for those, Matt is one of the slowest peers, I know. He takes forever in the bathroom. And so while he was in the bathroom for those 5 minutes of what would normally take somebody like 2 or 3 minutes, I felt and I observed and I let it move. And it was that simple. It is that simple. And I actually have the appendix of the map of consciousness from that letting go book that I keep on my little Bible here. And we have, so neutrality is almost right in the middle. I would say courage is right in the middle between the high vibe emotions and the low vibe emotions. And so neutrality, its emotion is trust and its process is release. So I choose neutrality here. Again and again and again, I choose a neutrality. And it's a great place to be. It has been a really great place to be. And it wouldn't have been very easy to get there if it were not for Iboga. Because I trust I would have gotten there at some point. But, we don't do these medicines to make us whole and complete. Rather, I don't believe any of these medicines, ayahuasca, bufo, Iboga, will ever provide completeness for you. It's more of just an expedited process to help you learn tools. And also with Iboga, what it's really beautiful about it has this objective outcome of flooding the brain with neurofactor proteins that reset so many pathways, like the limbic pathway, the limbic system, the dopamine pathways, as well as the opiate pathways. And just all the cortexes of my mind have been flooded with these regenerative proteins that have just allowed for a new story. And one of the beautiful gifts of Iboga is it resets the mind to a degree where it's really easy to be within silence. It also enhances our ability to learn. Our neuroplasticity is at an all-time high when our brain has been flooded with Iboga, which has been a damn cool experience. But here's the kicker. All of this silence, all of this heightened ability to learn is completely neutral. It has been completely up to me to decide the story that I'm going to rewrite my mind with. And so that's why I left social media, because I did not want to. It's like I was treating myself like I would if I just had a baby and I had a toddler who was interacting with the world for the first time. the last thing I wanted to do was expose myself to the dopamine fuckery that is social media. I'm going to do a whole podcast episode on boundaries with social media, and the phone in general. But yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to do. And you know, like now I have a lot of non-negotiables. Well, not a lot, actually. My 2 non-negotiables are eating in silence or with a friend. Either I'm eating with somebody and we're talking, or if I'm alone, I'm not reading, I'm not listening, I'm not watching shit. I am with my food, because I know from a Chinese medicine perspective, from a lens, that is so pivotal and important to the health of my entire body. And my other non-negotiable is no weed. I realized that I was addicted to weed, and weed is a medicine that loves chaos. And I noticed that my shame was so attached to my usage. And I wasn't addicted in a sense of like I was doing a lot and I had low tolerance. I really didn't smoke that much, but it was a bug that existed rent free in my mind every single day. And for years, I wanted and I tried to quit, but I wasn't able to because I just wanted it. And the moment that I'd spend all day like, you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. And then either something would happen, or I would convince myself of all the reasons why I deserved it, why I needed to just like take it easy on myself. And I would smoke it. And, you know, it's funny. I tell people this, and a lot of people, especially those who partake, they, you know, defend weed in their life. And that's great. Like, I think subjectively, it has really been bad news for me. Objectively, it's not necessarily a bad medicine. I think it can be very dangerous. And the idea that it is non-addictive is fucking bullshit. Oof, I got a little fire in me with that one. It is bullshit. It's not true. Just because it doesn't traditionally act on the brain like an addictive substance like heroin or kratom, it doesn't mean that it is non-addictive, because it is very habitually addictive. And anything can be addictive. Your phone, TV, sugar, caffeine is, because I see it as that traditional addiction, but we can talk about it another time. It was a bug on my brain and I couldn't stop, and it ruled my life. And every time I used, I spiraled into shame at some point or another. And what's really great is I was able to break that cycle. And I'm right now like very, very okay with the idea of never ever touching that plant medicine again. So yeah, Iboga's been fucking great. The last thing I want to touch on is courage. So the map of consciousness that I'm going to include in the show notes, it has a whole level of, and I have included it in the show notes before in other episodes. I can't think of them right now, but just when I talk about like energy work and all that good stuff. But I want to talk about courage because it is the pivot point between, so what lies just below courage is pride. Under that is anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, shame. Shame's right at the bottom. And then what's above courage is neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, enlightenment, all the good stuff. And that was one of the big things that helped me snap out of it, was acknowledging my courage. We all have courage within us. And courage, it gives us enough energy to be able to flip the script, to change the narrative, to do something about it. And what I think is very curious and wonderful is anger and pride exist right below courage. Shame is right at the bottom. Let's talk about shame and guilt. Shame is the idea that there is something wrong with me. Guilt is I've done something wrong. So when you're existing in a situation when you're obsessing, like I was in the very beginning when I was talking about what did I do wrong? What have I done wrong? What is wrong with me? that is shame and guilt, right? That's a really great whisper that you're existing right there. And it really helped me with the breakup with the friend. I spent so much time like, oh my God, I am this, I am that, all these things are wrong with me. And then I finally hit an emotion of, wait, I don't think I deserved to be treated this way in these aspects and blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden I was oscillating within anger. And within anger, I was able to be like, wait, I am not that bad. I am not the piece of shit that I have convinced myself that I am. I'm actually pretty damn great. And all of a sudden I'm like existing within pride. And pride can be dangerous for me because again, pride is so fleeting. Pride gives you a space to be questioned and a space to be defensive. But what's really interesting about pride and anger is compared to desire and fear and grief and apathy, guilt and shame, these things weigh you down and create a heaviness, a weakness in the body. But anger can actually give you a boost of energy. And with that boost of energy, what I've been doing, I've been treating it like fire or a trampoline. And I've been asking myself, okay, am I ready for a moment of courage? Is this my moment? What do I need the courage to do? And a lot of the times where I begin is, oh, I have the courage right now to face this. I have the courage right now to feel and to observe and to let it move. And then usually it turns into, oh, I have the courage to forgive, or I have the courage to look at other perspectives. I have the courage to show love and to let go of the details and look at the bigger picture and so on and so forth. And so that's my whole spiel on shame and guilt and humiliation and blame. Been there, done that. I'll probably be there and do that again because this life is not linear and it's circular. And I've learned that more than ever within these past 7 months. I'm pretty sure I'm in my solar return. I'd like to get someone on the show to talk about that. Someone who is a professional at astrology, because somebody recently told me that and I was like, oh my God, it makes sense. But I'm not going to go into talking about what I think that is. But it's shown me that the lessons, it's reminded me that the lessons that I thought I had down pat didn't really have that down pat. There was so much more to go, so much more depth, and so much more opportunity to remember why I'm here and what I'm capable of and how lovable I am. And I'm promising myself this right now, that the next time I am here to do this, I'm not going to waste a lot of time labeling and describing. I'm going to go straight into the letting go process, observing and letting it move. Thank you for listening to first episode of season 3, true style of the show. We just went deep. I'm really grateful for your open ears, your open heart. And there's so much more to come, so many more lessons. I could have kept going, but I'm not. I love you. If you would like to support this podcast, give it a share, give it a rating, give it a whatever it is, a subscribe. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you're returning, big hugs, big hugs. It's good to be back with you, my friend. All right. I will be feeling your energy next week.